I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Site Plan Review and Appearance Board for Wednesday, January 26th. It is 5:03 p.m. And Rochelle, if you could do roll call, please.
Stephen Cohen,
Here.
Dana Post-Adler,
Here.
Patton is absent, Carol Perez, here,
Here.
John Brewer,
Here.
Nick Ray,
Here.
Bud LaRue,
Here. All right. Next item is our approval of our agenda. Mr. Poppy, do you have any changes?
No changes.
Thank you. And if I could get a motion to approve the agenda, please.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Annette.
Stephen Cohen,
Yes.
Dana Post-Adler,
Yes.
Bryce Patton is absent, Carol Perez,
Yes.
John Brewer,
Yes.
Nick Ray,
Yes.
Bud LaRue,
Yes. All right. We do have minutes from the November 10th, 2021 SPRAB Board meeting. I hope you've all had a chance to review those. Do we have any comments, corrections?
Nope.
All right. Seeing none, if I could get a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Motion to approve. Meeting minutes.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, John.
I'm sorry, is that a Nick Ray that made the motion? Or Dana? Who-
Dana.
Dana.
Steve Cohen,
Yes.
Dana Post-Adler,
Yes.
Bryce Patton is absent, Carol Perez,
Yes.
John Brewer,
Yes.
Nick Ray,
Yes.
Bud LaRue,
Yes. All right, at this point in the meeting, we will swear in anybody who will be speaking tonight. If you are going to be speaking either in public comments or on any of the particular items that are before the board, either as a presenter or as a member of the public, please rise and prepare to be sworn in.
raise your right hand. By the authority vested in me as a notary of the state of Florida, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Thank you. Please be seated.
Right. Portions of tonight's meeting will be conducted in accordance with City of Delray Beach's Quasi-Judicial rules. I will read those rules. This hearing will be conducted in accordance with the City of Delray Beach Quasi-Judicial rules. The applicant and the city will be each permitted 20 minutes to present their case. The public will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes each, or a maximum of 6 minutes if the person represents an organization or a group of people who are present but agree not to speak. The board members, staff, and the applicant will be allowed to cross-examine a witness. The city or the applicant will be allowed to offer rebuttal testimony. The decision to approve or deny an application may be not legally made on the personal views as to whether a project is a good project or not, nor may a decision be based on the number of citizens who support or oppose a particular project. The law requires that all decisions must be based on the basis of whether or not the project meets the requirements of law, the comprehensive plan, and the land development regulations. At this point in the meeting, we open up the meeting to the general public to give comments on items that are not appearing before us tonight. So if you have any items about the business that normally would come before us but is not on tonight's agenda, issues with projects in the past and issues of projects in the future, that would be the time to speak. All right, seeing and hearing none, I will close that portion of the meeting. We will move on to our first quasi-judicial hearing item, item 7A, and I believe Ms. Falcone is presenting on this one.
Good evening, Rachel Falcone, planner, City of Delray Beach. For the record, entering agenda item 7A into the record for First Patient Care Clinic, file number 2021-208, for a reconsideration of amendment to the Lake Ida Plaza Master Sign Program to accommodate signage for new tenant space. And the applicant is here to present.
Thank you. And board members, any ex parte communication on this item?
No.
Okay, I did actually drive by the site and take a close look at it, the layout, et cetera, but I did not have any other communication. All right, if you would, your floor is yours. You have up to 20 minutes. I don't think you'll need that, but
Good evening, Renato Lona, 107 Northwest 66th Street, Doral, Florida. What we're proposing is, well, it's actually the second time we've been here, and we're proposing the same signs. We just removed the We Care and the phone number on the top right of the building, and that was pretty much what we spoke about last meeting.
okay, thank you. And Ms. Falcone.
Okay, just to refresh everyone's memory, the property is located at the corner of Lake Ida Road and North Congress Avenue, and the tenant space is at this corner of the property. It was reviewed 2 weeks ago on January 12th, and they had additional signage as We Care and the phone number. And now, based off of board comments, the applicant has proposed to remove the We Care signage and the phone number from the application. So now, with the previous proposal, they were proposing 3 signs, and now they're only proposing 2, which does meet the master sign program regulations. So now the proposal in front of you is just to allow for the channel letters illuminated with LEDs and the blue lettering. And the window signage is not a part of the sign program. And the blue letters will not introduce a garish quality to the plaza, and will be in keeping with the remainder of the plaza as well. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Anybody from the public wish to speak on this item? Ms. Finst, if you could come to the podium over here to my right, your left.
If you could put the picture up again.
I'm just questioning if this isn't advertising rather than regular signage, because that's what it is. It's not names of different businesses that are there. It's advertising.
Ms. Finst, I believe it is the name of their business, which is there. That is their business name.
The
So,
name of the business is Patient Care Clinic.
First Patient Care Clinic.
What's the furthest one down?
The one furthest to the south is the word first. So it says First Patient Care Clinic, and that is the name of their business. And they're doing one of those words in each of the bays that they have leased.
Okay, and then on the,
And then on the end is their logo,
well, on the west,
right? That's
Above
at
their
north, that's
logo, they
facing
have-
north, yep.
have a phone number. Is that also appropriate?
Phone number was removed. The lower picture is the.
Okay.
Yep. So they removed that after our conversation, which you, of course, gave your comments last session as
Thank
well.
you.
Excuse me, Ms. Finst, before she leaves, can you please state your full name and your address for the record?
I'm
you,
sorry,
Michelle.
Alice Fence, 707 Place Devon, Delray Beach, 33445.
Thank you.
All right, any additional testimony or rebuttal from the applicant? Okay, and from the city?
No, I'm good, thank you.
All right, to the board then, and we'll start with Carol.
Thank you for listening to the board and cleaning up the signage. I think it looks fine.
Thank you. Annette?
No comments.
John?
Nothing.
Tina?
Yeah, I concur. Thank you. It looks much better.
Thank you, guys.
Steven?
Thank you, it looks good. Thank you.
All right, and I agree with that. You know, we appreciate you listening. I think this is an improvement, and I think it still accomplishes the company's mission to get their name out there and let people know where they are. So can I get a motion, please?
I'll move approval of the amendment to the Lake Ida Plaza Master Sign Program 2021-208 located at 600 North Congress Avenue based on the positive findings to the LDR Section 4.0 6.7F2B.
Thank you. And a second.
Second.
Thank you, Annette.
Stephen Cohen,
Yes.
Dana Postadler,
Yes.
Bryce Patton is absent, Carol Perez,
Yes.
John Brewer,
Yes.
Annette Gray,
Yes.
Todd LaRue.
Yes. Thank you. The change to the master sign program is approved.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to our next item, which is a 7B. And I believe the applicant's present. Ms. Buse, if you could introduce to the record.
Hi, good evening. Jennifer Buse, planner. For the record, this is 2022-084. This is the Ray amendment to the master sign program at 233 Northeast 2nd Ave, and the applicant is here.
Thank you. And board members, any ex parte communication on this item?
No.
No.
All right, seeing and hearing none. Mr. Arjura, if you could state your name and address and go ahead with your presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Jordana Georgiou with Menon Development. I live at 200 Northeast 2nd Avenue, and we were talking about the Ray Hotel. Ember is the restaurant at 233 Northeast 2nd Avenue. Jen, if you want to go to the next slide. So we were originally before you for a master sign program when we got the Ray approved. As you know, we opened on September 1st. We have the Ray Hotel signage, which fronts 2nd Avenue on the southwest corner, and then we have the Ray signage on as you come into the plaza, the lobby plaza. We also have the Shops with the Ray, which hasn't been installed yet, on the northwest corner because we're still waiting for that signage. God love COVID. And Akira Back, which is opening in March. Their signage is going over their door. We originally came to you and asked for an Ember sign. Jen, if you could move forward, I think 3 or 4 slides. Keep going, right there. So originally, if any of you are familiar with the outdoor patio area of Ember, the signage was supposed to be over its door. We are actually coming back before you guys to do a site plan modification because we added so much more landscaping to our planners to give that really like almost like a secret garden, tropical modern feel. So one of the confusion that we've had since opening is no one knows where the entrance of Ember is because it's so tucked in, and you don't go through the hotel to get to it. It has its own exterior entrance, which is not off 2nd, unlike Akira, which is the entrance has off a 2nd plus the outdoor patio. So we decided to relocate the signage. So we're before you now. If you want to go to the next slide. It's in the planter. That's a close-up shot. So you could see the outdoor signage there, and that would be where the location of the new signage would be. And then the next slide, Jen. That gives you the shot from across the valet, Ember, so you could see it from 2nd Avenue. You get dropped off in the valet, and you could see that that's the entrance to the Ember outdoor patio area. And that's the change we're seeking. It's in total 13.6 square feet. It's going to be a almost like a wood-looking sign with light green LED backlit channel letters. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Thank you. And Ms. Buse.
Here's mine. Okay, as stated, this is a consideration of an amendment to the Ray sign program. This is in CBD, and just a bit of a history of the background of what was approved in the original master sign program, which was about a year ago. We do have the monument sign that's at the end of the shops and the wall signs for the shops at the Ray. And these are the 3 identification signs for the Ray. We have the Akira sign, which is on the northwest corner, and the Ember Grill sign, which is on the southwest facade. And this is the proposed sign for the amendment to the sign program, and as stated, it is 13.64 square feet. It is located in the main entrance, which is through their civic open space. It's comparatively small for the size of the structure, the Ray Hotel. And the proposed colors of the sign are compatible with the tropical theme. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this item? Seeing and hearing none, we'll close that portion of the meeting. Do you have any additional testimony or rebuttal?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you. And the city?
I do not.
All right, to the board then. Stephen, would you like to start?
Sure. So which direction is the sign facing?
So if you're standing directly on Second Avenue, facing east towards the hotel, there's 3 planters. The planter that's, do you have like a pointer, Jen? So it's the planter that's, it's literally facing Second Avenue. It's
Okay.
perpendicular, parallel to Second Avenue. So if you're in Second Avenue and you look directly east, you would see that sign.
Okay.
So the idea is, as when people get dropped off by the valet or walking by, they actually see that this is the outdoor entrance to the civic space,
Right.
outdoor dining area, and Ember.
So the entrance is to the right there?
Yes, so
Okay.
you would walk through that, there's like basically a pathway between 2 planters, and it goes into our outdoor dining area, and the entrance is through there.
All right. I don't have any further questions.
All right, Dana?
I'm glad that we're putting a sign there because it is very difficult to really navigate. I was there just about a week or so ago. My question is for Jen. Could you put back up the slide with the other signs so that we can kind of understand what it's going to look like eventually?
Which,
That one. No, that one you just had. Yeah, so Ember's to the right, and then to the left, what?
That's Akira
Oh,
back.
that's Akira. Okay, I get it. So is it going to be sort of symmetrical, one on each side?
So originally, that's how, we had it planned, that the signage off of Second Avenue, because Akira actually has an entrance off Second Avenue, it makes sense for it to be. Ember's entrance is through the outdoor dining area, civic space, so that's where the confusion is. We don't actually use, there's a door off of Second Avenue for Ember, but we don't use it, it's emergency exit only. So that's why we wanted to relocate the signage to where the entrance to that civic space area is.
So it's hard to see the depth for what the Akira sign's going to be. Is it pushed
Yeah,
towards the
I
building?
gotta send you, Jen, all of our updated photos, so you could use the photos rather than the rendering, so it's a little bit easier to understand it.
So it's not going to be in a planter, it's going to be flush?
Ember sign,
No,
Akira?
yeah.
The Akira's on, there's these wood panelings that are being applied over the glass, and it's gonna be suspended off of that. And that was part of our original site,
Okay.
so I don't have the dimensions,
Okay.
but it should be,
it's,
send it to you.
yeah, the Ember Grill was about 11 square feet, and I think the Akira sign was either a little bit more than that or below that, which is very relatively small for such a large building.
I mean, I know you're not here for the Akira sign, but I'm just trying to make a comprehensive decision with
Right.
both, so.
You actually, other than if you're sitting in City Walk, probably, or at Brule, you're not gonna be able to see, both signage because of the length of the building.
Yeah.
But like across the street, if you're at Brule or Joseph, you'll be able to see Akira back, and now you'll be able to see Ember sign. The way that it was before, you wouldn't be able to see Ember sign.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
John?
No, I don't have any questions. Pretty self-evident what they're trying to do, and I don't think it's intrusive or taking away anything from the neighborhood, so nothing.
Annette?
Similar, no comments.
Okay. Anyone want to make a motion then?
So, make a motion for the Ray, consideration of an amendment to the Ray sign program for, what is that, the PSN number?
Yeah, the 202
All right.
2084 is the project number.
Okay, it's not on here. All right. Oh, here we go. 22-124 at the Ray, 233 Northeast 2nd Avenue.
Second.
Thank you, John.
Stephen Cohen,
Yes.
Tina Post-Adler,
Yes.
Mike Patton is absent, Carol Perez, John Brewer,
Yes.
Annette Gray,
Yes.
Todd LaRue.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Jen.
All right. And we move on to item 7C.
Hi, good evening, Chairman and members of the board. My name is Rebecca Dossery. I'm a senior planner with Development Services, and we have representatives from Kimley Horn to discuss the proposed site plan amendment for Island Cove.
All right, and the project number?
Oh, yes, we're reading into the record file number 2021-264.
Thank you. And board members, any ex parte communication on this item?
No.
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 All right.
I did speak to one of the attorneys today that called me and asked me if I had any questions. So gave me an overview of the project.
Okay. Anyone else? No. All right. If you could then state your name and address for the record and then go ahead with your presentation.
Great, thank you. Name is Jason Weber with Kimley Horn. We're located at 1615 South Congress Avenue, Suite 201 in Delray Beach. And thank you, Mr. Chair and board members. Excited to be here tonight and present to you the Island Cove, formerly known as Village Square Phase 3. It's an affordable housing project in the city, very well needed, as you are all very aware, with the housing crisis that we're in right now. So very excited to be here again, actually, in front of this board. So I'll get into a little bit of the history. We have our full development team here tonight, comprising the Delray Beach Housing Authority. We have Shirley Arazo here, the Delray Housing Group, which is the management arm of the Delray Beach Housing Authority, as well as Smith & Hensey Affordable Group. We've got Michael Hensey here as well. So they can answer some great questions about their process in this project. But the group we have here today is committed to reducing and eliminating the affordable housing crisis that we have in Delray Beach and in Greater Palm Beach County tonight. The Delray Housing Group already owns and manages 707 units of affordable apartments in Delray. And Smith & Hensey has a national reputation, but is actually based here in Delray Beach and excited to do the project here for this community. In addition, I got myself, Kimley Horn, civil engineer, planner, landscape architect, traffic engineer, and REG architects here as well, to answer any questions we have. So a little bit about the project location. The project name is Island Cove, as I mentioned, formerly known as Village Square Housing Phase 3. You can see on this map, the Island Cove project sits between Southwest 10th Street and Southwest 8th Street. And then on the east and west side, Southwest 12th Ave and Southwest 13th Ave. It's approximately 3 acres. It's been vacant for over 10 years after the development of Village Square Housing Phases 1 and 2. The future land use is transitional, and the zoning district is medium density residential, the RM district, with a Carver Estates overlay. So a little bit of the history of Village Square. As I mentioned, phases 1 and 2 have been built. Originally, they were condemned. The area that they house right now was condemned after Hurricane Wilma. And that was a very needed redevelopment, both affordable housing, one as a senior living, and one as your more standard multifamily affordable housing. One important piece here, you can see the difference between 2008 and 21. Great development. Both phases 1 and 2 are completely at full capacity right now. And the Housing Authority has a very long wait list. So affordable housing, as we all know, is very needed, and they have the documentation to back that up. So this project, as mentioned, was approved as a 3-phase project in 2011, but phase 3 was never constructed. It was originally approved as a combination of single-family houses and duplex residential units. In 2019, we actually came before you and the Planning and Zoning and City Commission. We got a density increase to change those single-family and duplex units to fee simple townhouse units. And that was going to be 54 in that original approval, which we got our approval from SPRAB in June of 2019. Now, that's been about 2 years in the making since that approval. The Delray Beach Housing Authority unfortunately could not get the financing to work to build those fee simple townhouse units. And another point of reference, they were all market rate units, so they were not going to be marketed or performed as affordable housing. Current project approval track, we recently went to P&Z to request a slight increase from the previously approved density, going from 54 of those townhome units to 60 affordable rental units. So a couple of changes here, as we noted, the difference between the fee simple ownership townhome units and affordable rental apartment units, and then the increase from 54 to 60. So very slight increases in the overall dwelling units per acre. We're still well below the permitted threshold in this zoning district, which could go up to 24 units per acre. We're just shy of 16. And actually, with the change from the townhome product, we're actually reducing the overall FAR of the project and the overall building footprint. And yeah, again, a key point for this is the fact that we're changing from market rate units to all affordable housing units. And then we're here tonight in front of you for our request for site plan approval, as well as a landscape waiver and parking reduction request. So we talked about product type. We've got our partners here from the development team who could answer the detailed questions about potential rates if you guys have any questions about that. But we are marketing this all to either the very low or the low income range for Delray Beach, with a focus on our hometown heroes for teachers, firefighters, EMTs, police, and nurses in the Delray Beach community. As a point of reference, we have 40 two-bedroom units and 20 three-bedroom units. All right, so let's dig into the site plan. We've got a great site plan that we've developed with the team and working collaboratively with the staff. We've got 5 buildings at 12 units each, so for our 60 total. The 3-bedroom units are clustered in the center, with both wings on the outside being the 2-bedroom units. We have some great amenities, and actually they have expanded since the previous approval in 2019, which had a very small clubhouse and pool. We've expanded the clubhouse to provide some much needed amenities for the residents and their guests, including a tot lot for a toddler amenity and a permanent concrete bag toss, also known as cornhole, for a teen amenity, which we worked with staff to get some good creative options for the teen amenity. In addition, we're working with the staff and the surrounding area for multimodal improvements as well. So we're adding a new bus shelter on Southwest 10th. That's along the Palm Tran route. And we've coordinated with the proposed plans that are already in the works for Southwest 10th improvements. And we're adding a raised pedestrian crossing to Village Square Housing 1 and 2 that also functions as a speed hump to reduce the traffic speeds along Southwest 8th. We have several parking spaces on site with 2 smaller lots, as well as a lot of parallel parking spaces immediately adjacent to the building, and then on-street parking as well. And this will be important to the next couple of topics that we're going to talk about. So first, I'll tackle the parking reduction request. The parking reduction request is a necessary evil for this project because of 2 things. One, the space that's allotted for the project. We need the number of units to really truly make it a very financially viable project. And the code requirement for those units is 2 spaces per unit plus guest spaces. With your typical affordable housing project, there is not quite the demand that you would have on your standard residential multifamily project. So the 141 spaces, which ends up being 2.35 spaces per unit when you work in the guest spaces, far exceeds what the typical demand is. We performed a parking study that had several different evaluations that we did. The first was the ITE, so that's the Transportation Engineers, Institute of Transportation Engineers parking generation. They evaluate many different projects of this type and others around the country, and they have typical parking rates. That would equate for this project with the 60 units at about 108 spaces required. We looked at a project in Dallas, a similar multifamily residential project, and again, that would equate to a required parking of 75 spaces. And then 2 projects, one in Delray Beach and one in Boynton Beach, recent residential multifamily projects, and look not only at the code requirements, but their actual utilization of those spaces. And that, for a project of our size, would result in 78 required spaces. Now, when we went to P&Z, we originally had on the plan 114 parking spaces. So exceeding the numbers that were both in the parking study but not quite meeting the code requirement. So P&Z's recommendation for a minimum number of parking spaces was 114. On the plan you see in front of you today, and that was approved by, or recommended for approval by staff, we have 116 spaces. That equates to 1.9 spaces per unit. So keep that number in mind. In order to accommodate that, we also, like I mentioned, have the new bus shelter. We're encouraging people to use public transportation such as PalmTran, and then have short-term and long-term bike storage. So the long-term bike storage that's on site, although required by code, is also a benefit to the residents because they can take their bicycles, store them inside a fully enclosed and secured structure that only they can access. So we do have some options for potential overflow parking in Village Square Housing's Phase 1 and 2. Like I mentioned, there's a raised pedestrian crossing from Island Cove into the other development to the north. And those parking areas are secured and have access codes for the gated parking, and they have nighttime security. Now, on the left, we have a chart of the required spaces and the number of units, and these are on the approved site plans for Village Square Housing Phases 1 and 2. You can see the senior living was parked at a lower rate, and the multifamily residential was parked generally at the code required rate, that 2.3 spaces per unit. Together, they equate to 1.9 spaces per unit, which is actually what we're parking Island Cove at in the current plan. So being consistent with the other affordable housing right in the area, to further go beyond that, even though they are parked at 1.9 spaces per unit, we did actual observations on a typical workday and a typical weekend. Did those before 5 a.m., so we ensured that we had as many spaces filled up by people sleeping as possible. And on each of those days, we had 117 and 118 spaces still available. You can see one of the diagrams over here on the left with the red spaces marked off as those were open spaces. So there is significant available capacity in Village Square Phase 1 and 2 if there are folks from Island Cove who would require parking and we could not accommodate them. And I'll turn it over to Andrea. She's got a little extra color.
Good evening. My name is Andrea Kaiser with Kaiser Legal. I'm the land use and zoning attorney for this applicant. My address is 55 Southeast 2nd Avenue, Delray Beach, Florida, 33444. Thank you for this opportunity to present to you this evening to supplement the parking reduction request, and thank you, Jason, for sharing some of your time. The parking reduction request is really important, so we wanted to take a moment to share with you why affordable housing projects are different than your typical development projects and ought to be treated differently when you're evaluating this parking reduction request. It is actually common practice to reduce parking for affordable housing projects, not only on a state level, but a national level. So for example, in Florida Statute 420.9076, it requires your city's Affordable Housing Advisory Committee to review and recommend actions or initiatives to encourage or facilitate affordable housing developments. And the statute specifically requires that includes reductions in parking and increases in density. So the city's last affordable housing incentive plan that we can find on file was resolution number 9994. It did include a parking reduction incentive in there, but it doesn't appear to have been updated since 1994. So as we know, the transportation in the city's landscape has really changed much since then. So for example, affordable housing projects, really alternative modes of transportation decrease parking demand in affordable housing projects. And specifically for this property, as Jason mentioned, you've got the PalmTran stop on site. You have a proximity to the Tri-Rail. It's within a reasonable walking distance, about a mile. And you have a designated bicycle route for this project. In addition, and more importantly, the reasons why parking reductions are inherently necessary for affordable housing projects is because without a parking reduction, you get a loss of affordable housing units, which are really important because the city needs affordable housing units. So the size of 1.5 parking spaces with the drive aisle is equal to more than half the size of a typical 2-bedroom unit in an affordable housing project. So having having an excessive parking requirement doesn't allow the developer to maximize the number of units and increase their density while still justifying the cost and justifying the decrease in rent. So the reason why your team today here is so important is because this project, it's taken 10 years to come to fruition. And tonight you have a team of experts where they have expertise not only in the financial complexities of getting affordable housing projects funded, but also they're experts in site plan development for these particular projects. The cost of parking is so expensive that it raises rent, which is counterproductive to the intent of the affordable housing model. But as further justification to reduce parking for affordable housing projects, there are national studies that show that affordable housing parking, it's really underutilized. So Victoria Transit Policy Institute out of Washington stated that lower income households tend to own fewer than average vehicles, which forces the developer and residents to pay for this unneeded parking. And the Fox-Tuttle Shopwork study estimates that more than 50% of parking in affordable housing projects go unused. And actually, our sister affordable housing project is a perfect example. You have 118 unused parking spaces in that project. So if you don't take into account those 118 spaces, the parking rate is really 1.3. And yet the city requires 2. We're parking at a 1.9 rate. Finally, the San Diego Affordable Housing Parking Study, their model actually recommends that you allot only 1 space per unit. So to conclude, I just wanted to share with you the message that affordable housing projects comprise a unique set of circumstances that justify the reduction in parking, and that should be a consideration for you to use in your evaluation tonight of the parking, in addition to our parking study, and also in addition that we have overflow parking just in case of an emergency. Also, we risk to lose approximately $13 million in federal funding if the parking reduction request becomes an issue for us and this project is not approved tonight. So if you have any further questions, I also want to share with you that the chair of the Delray Beach Housing Authority, Dr. Jesse Saganar, is a professor of Department of Urban and Regional Planning at FAU. He provided me much of these research studies, and he's here to answer questions, for any specific questions that you may have regarding the national standard of accommodating affordable housing projects and granting these parking reduction requests. So for all those reasons, I thank you, and I'm going to turn it over back to Jason.
And Jason, before you get started, we do have time limits now on presentations. You're up against about 2 minutes left of your time, but I'm guessing that you have more to go than 2 minutes worth.
A little bit, we'll zoom through.
But I'm going to allow you extra time because I think this is an important project and we need to see all the details of it. So,
thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. We'll roll fast. So here's our landscape colored site plan, keeping in mind the parking reduction request and the reason for all of that, the request, as well as our second request. So you can see on this, we've got a heavily landscaped plan in basically all areas that we have available to us, primarily native trees and shrubs and a significant variety of species. We are requesting a request for a landscape waiver from that LDR section noted there for the street trees. The requirement is 1 street tree per 40 linear feet of street frontage, which we have around our entire project, which would be a total of 43 street trees. We've provided 20 street trees circled in red. And a note is that we do meet and exceed all the other city landscape code criteria, and we have provided an additional 17 trees throughout the interior of the site. Just showing why those trees are where they are and why we can't put more is the on-street parking. We've essentially done what we can and worked with staff as much as possible to be able to put as many trees and meet code as well as possible, but we're balancing the parking reduction request with the landscape waiver request as well. Moving quickly into architecture, here's our floor plan, 2 stories, 12 units per building. As I mentioned, the interior are the 3-bedroom units and the exterior 2 wings are 2-bedroom units. We've got a Dutch Caribbean architectural style, and I've got Rick and Christine with REG Architects who can go into much better detail if you guys have some questions, but we've got two different color schemes that you can see here. For the first scheme, like a blue pastel palette here with dark blue accents, and then more of a greenish gray with tangerine accents on the second building type. Our clubhouse, as I mentioned, has a lot of good amenities for the residents and their guests, with a community center, media room, business center for them to help work themselves and improve their lives, fitness center, and other amenities. And then similar type architectural style for the clubhouse and their elevations here. And we've got some great architectural renderings here. This is the south entrance coming from Southwest 10th, looking into the project through that main center spine. And then the southeast elevation, so you can get a feel for both of those different architectural color palettes on the two different types of buildings. In an east elevation perspective, and the bird's eye view. So a quick note of the project benefits compared to the 2019 approved project. They're all affordable housing units. There's actually a smaller building footprint overall on the site from the 2019 approval, and that allowed us to provide more green space and more and larger amenities. All of them are two-story buildings. The previous approval in 2019 actually had three-story chunks in the middle of the buildings, and the wings were two-story. So it actually has a much better massing to the surrounding neighborhood than the previous approval. And then again, mentioning some overall improvements, another note, we do have to provide street lighting on Southwest 12th and 13th Avenue, as well as providing a more affordable housing for the community. And it is developing a site that has laid vacant for over 10 years at this point. And with that, myself and the team are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And the city, Mr. Sari.
Hello, good evening again. So our applicant did a really thorough job of presenting the details of the project. So in my presentation, I'm going to try to focus on the criteria for approval as it relates to these different features of the development and try to skip over anything unnecessary. So as we all know, this is a site plan modification because of the approved site plan for 54 units on this site. So associated with the request tonight is the site plan with parking reduction, the landscape plan with the tree waiver for street trees, and the architectural plan. And this would be the site plan for the entire development, again replacing 54 townhome units with 60 apartment units. And this is just a closer zoomed in view of the proposed plan for this phase 3 portion of Village Square. The land use is transitional. It's located within the Carver Estates Overlay District, and it has medium density residential zoning, which will become a little more important in discussing the criteria for the site plan. Whereas the approval from the Planning and Zoning Board granted a maximum density of 15.84 acres, the responsibility to approve the actual proposed density is with the Site Plan Review and Appearance Board, and that's achieved through meeting the requirements in the Overlay District as well as RM zoning. And again, this just quickly shows how it was 15.51 dwelling units with the previous request, and it's would be 15.84 with the 60 apartment units. The proposed development is in compliance with the development requirements for floor area, lot coverage, etc. And in many areas, it exceeds the lot coverage maximum is 40%, but it's at 33%. And they have 42% open space, whereas 25% is required. And within the Carver Estates Overlay District, there's also special setbacks which they meet or exceed in the proposal. For the revitalization incentive for Carver Estates Overlay, the requirements are that it has to meet the different performance standards, which I'll be discussing in a moment, and it has to provide the affordable housing subject to the affordable housing regulations within the city of Delray Beach. So they're proposing a total project density of 15.84 dwelling units per acre and 0.38 FAR, which complies with the land use standards for this area. In this area, the bonuses are determined, the density bonuses are determined by the type of units that are provided. So the applicant is proposing 42 very low income units and 18 low income units with the mix of 2 and 3 bedroom units. So this slide here is not an analysis of what is proposed, but more within the requirements of this section, the maximum, looking at the hypotheticals, by providing 100% affordable, they would have these theoretical max density that they could achieve, which is clearly when the size of the land, the property could result in a max build out of 73 dwelling units if developed to 24 dwelling units per acre. So I think just this slide is, I have it here to illustrate that the incentive bonus is designed more for promoting affordability with market rate projects. So this, by providing 100% of the units, certainly exceeds that requirement. These are the performance standards that are required to go over 6 dwelling units per acre. So within RM zoning, to get over 6 dwelling units per acre, you have to meet these requirements substantially. And then to get over 12 dwelling units per acre, they have to meet the performance standards and the workforce housing requirements. You can see some of them apply and some of them do not, just because of it being a smaller project. There are different components that don't necessarily apply. And then and one of the requirements in this acknowledges that some performance standards may not if it's a smaller project. So I'm going to go through each of those and show quickly how it meets the standards. So one of the standards is that there should be interior and exterior traffic circulation and traffic calming. They've provided different speed humps and crosswalks in the internal alleyway, and they have the speed table proposed on Southwest 8th Street. There should be appropriate building placement to reduce the overall mass and feeling of the development. And from this bird's eye view, you can see that this provides more open space than the 54 townhomes by the configuration with the 5 buildings of 12 units each building. Proposals seeking the increased density should also have varied streetscape and building design, and this shows the elevations along Southwest 13th and Southwest 12th Street. The 2 different color schemes, as well as the different design features on the buildings, provide some variation to the view along the street. And this is another shot of their colored renderings of it, and it shows how the landscape will provide some of that interest along the road. Proposed developments should have a variety of unit types, sizes, and floor plans. And there are the 2 models, a 2-bedroom floor plan and a 2-bedroom accessible or handicap accessible, and then a 3-bedroom accessible and non-accessible unit. And they have the mix of 2 and 3 bedroom units scattered between the different income levels. Developments should also provide bike ped access to the bike ped network and transit. So the transit shelter is proposed along Southwest 10th Street. Tri-rail is accessible by bus, as well as the bike and pedestrian improvements. Southwest 10th Street is slated to have 10-foot sidewalks along both sides of the street, which adds some safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. And then within the development itself, there's sidewalks, which are highlighted here, that show how the sidewalks are around the entire perimeter as well as inside of the development. So for parking, this chart here shows the requirements for parking as well as the spaces that are provided. Bicycle parking is provided in excess of the requirement, both long-term and short-term, long-term being for visitors, and the more secure for anyone who's living at the development. So as our applicant discussed, they're requesting the reduction in parking. And before I actually go into their study a little bit, as they explained very thoroughly, reduction of parking for affordable projects is as standard best practice within affordable housing development, and generally parking standards, whether it be for affordable units or market rate units, are typically over parking developments, so there is justification and best practices for this as well. And then the applicant has provided a study that meets professional standards for parking analysis, and their different examples provided show that the reduction is not out of line with best practices. For the landscape design, the proposed landscape plan is generally compliant, with the exception of the waivers for the street trees. Again, they are required to have 43 street trees, but they're proposing 20, which relates again to the parking along the street, which prohibits them from being able to do the full number. The criteria for granting a waiver is that are before you on the screen. So generally, the proposed waiver is not adversely affecting the neighboring areas. There's currently a blank site with no trees at all, and it wouldn't be granting special privilege because any other applicant in a similar situation could ask for the same request. This is a list of the trees that are proposed. It may be a little hard to read at this distance. I know my contacts aren't great either, but they are proposing a variety of trees to meet this street tree requirement. The criteria for architectural elevations and aesthetics are provided in LDR section 4618. So they are proposing the Dutch Caribbean architecture. It complements, I believe it's Florida vernacular, in Village Square phases 1 and 2. And they have different color schemes and architectural details on each building in order to add interest to the development. There are several required findings for a site plan, and this one relates to the compatibility with surrounding land use. So there's a single-family residential to the east of the property, and then the phases 1 and 2 of Village Square to the north. To the south and east are different, to the south and west are different outdoor storage, warehousing type industrial development. LDR section 311 has required findings related to the land use map, concurrency, consistency, and compliance with the LDRs. So I've discussed all of those throughout my presentation, but I wanted to quickly focus on the consistency with the comprehensive plan. There are a number of policies within our adopted comprehensive plan related to the use of density incentives to achieve workforce housing, and to utilize funds from federal, state, and local housing programs, and to collaborate with private sector partners in order to bring affordable housing to the market. And given our projected population growth and the cost of housing, which these are even pre-now numbers, we have extremely high cost of housing in Delray Beach. So then you have your options for board action, and I'll be available to answer any questions along with the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this item? If you would, please come to the podium over here to my right, your left. State your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes or 6 minutes if you are presenting on behalf of a group that is present but chooses not to speak.
I'm Ezra Krieg, live at 2984 Needham Court in Delray Beach. I, like you, are a volunteer with the city. I serve on the Delray Beach Housing Authority Board, but that was my second choice. I wanted to serve on the Affordable Housing Commission, but that commission has not met for many, many years. If that commission had been meeting, a proposal like this would have come before that commission, and that commission would then be working with the folks to produce this affordable housing opportunity. We don't have that, and so one of the things that we need to do is come to you. All of us in Delray Beach know what the housing crisis is here. We don't have to spend any time talking about it. We're all aware. This is an incredible opportunity to bring outside investment. This money is not coming from the city, it's coming from outside investment, is coming here to help us serve our neighbors who are desperately in need of housing. And I hope as my neighbors, you will choose to help this project go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Finst?
Alice Finch, can you hear me?
Yes.
707 Place, Tavant. In this plan, do these units have porches?
No, the units do not have porches.
So then you're going to have people sitting outside on chairs? I question that, how that's going to look. And I think you need to make some adjustment on this, because then people will be wanting to put their barbecues outside, and are you setting up areas of slabs with barbecue places? I think there's some things missing here. And there was some comment, I think, about bike storage, and some other comment about a bus shelter. I think there's some empty spaces in this project that need to be adjusted, because people come to Florida and they want to be outside, and we got no porches. People can be dropping off chairs wherever outside their front door. And are you going to have an area for barbecue? People will push their barbecues over to a slab somewhere? I mean, I think, and then there's some comment about a bus shelter. And then where are people storing their bikes if they don't have a porch or some adjacent area where they can put things? So I think you need to look at a few things on this project so that it doesn't end up being kind of a erratic storage area in the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Finst. Anybody else from the public that wishes to speak on this project? All right, seeing and hearing none, we will close down the public comment portion, and we'll give the applicant a chance to give any additional comments or testimony or rebuttal to what's been heard so far.
Michael Henze, 198 Northeast 6th Avenue, Delray Beach, Florida. I thank you for the comments. First, I'd like to address the porches. No, there are no porches for the units. We have a 3,000 square foot clubhouse that will come fully equipped with a furniture package that we have an interior designer designing currently. Second, we have a pool that will also include outdoor furniture for resident use at no charge, of course. It's part of their property that they live on. And third, typically for our multifamily developments, we do not allow grilling on the units. That's not allowed. Causes issues. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right, and is there a public area that would allow for public grills to be installed?
Currently, there is not.
Okay, thank you. Any other rebuttal or additional testimony that you want to give at this time? All right, on behalf of the city, any additional?
I just had one point of clarification. I think our attorney reminded me before the meeting. The applicant has appealed the condition placed on the conditional use for the density. They conditioned the approval on 114 parking units, 114 on-site parking spaces, and the applicant has filed an appeal which is going to City Commission on February 1st. So the board, if they would approve the parking request, it would they would be able to do that. It wouldn't become a final approval until after the appeal is heard. So that's just a point of order for business.
Okay, and what is it that they are looking for in that appeal?
that they are not required to provide 114 spaces on site. Our parking code allows off-site, on-street parking spaces to be counted towards the parking totals, but
So they're asking for that
that condition
calculation,
to
the
be lifted.
114 or 116, was it, that they're providing total, including the street parking? Is that correct?
Yes, 116. And so the parking, it's debatable whether or not it was within the purview of the condition that was placed on it. So that's why the appeal had to go to City Commission, just to
Confirm that.
confirm that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so to the board then, I noticed lots of notes being taken. Annette, would you like to start?
It's probably a good thing.
Just, address the applicant or address the city as you feel appropriate, or you can ask general questions and we'll try to figure out who best to go to.
Yeah, no worries. I just have some general comments to start. And I fundamentally do not agree with this project being a rental project. Our citizens are being priced out of affordable fee simple. And as migration from the north comes and buys properties cash, that dream is going further and further and further away from our residents. That being said, having been around this redevelopment world for about 30 years, I find the words affordable workforce housing, low-income housing, and very low-income housing being used sometimes inappropriately, sometimes interchangeably, and cherry-picking of the different variables to make project works. I think a little bit of that's going on here today. If the target project is towards low income and very low income, I see heads shaking, okay? So that's a clarification for me, please. Then the socioeconomic benchmarks that have been discussed here today, I think is inaccurate. I think the benchmark research of projects in cities that have been used to quantify the request are inaccurate. So when you look at DC and San Diego, they have amazing public transportation. That's not a dig on Palm Tran. It's the frequency, it's the variety, it's the number of things. So when you cite a project to me that says in low income or very low income, there is justification and quantifiable justification for a reduction in parking and increase in density, I'm not going to mince my words. That's how we get most of the projects that are unappealable across our country. Okay, and when I use the word projects, I mean projects. I'm not going to use urban because I want you to understand what I'm saying. That target population also in Florida, they don't ride bicycles. The adults don't. They simply don't. Look at your target market for who is going to live in these projects. Some of the kids might, but for the most part, they're not bicycle owners. Okay, so the parking situation and the alleviation of the bus stop and the bicycle racks, to me, is not an appropriate solution for Florida. It may hold very true in other parts of the country, but not in Florida. If you stood outside in August in one of our very lovely bus shelters, you will understand why 90% of Palm Tran buses that goes by is less than a quarter full. So I'm struggling with this project while I understand that we need affordable housing. And then there is another comment around the potential of losing something of 1.7 or $1.4 million in federal fundings if we don't approve this project. And I'd like to know what funding. Are we talking about AARP money? Because if that's the case, we have until 2026 to spend that.
I think actually to address several of these questions, I'd like to invite Michael back up to the podium.
And one thing, so as William City Attorney's office down in the box. Nothing in the LDRs that I'm aware of, and Rebecca can either confirm or clarify for me. The issue of the funding and whether they're going to have it or lose it based upon this board's decision is largely irrelevant, if not completely irrelevant, under the elements of the LDR that this board is tasked with reviewing. Whether they might lose it or not is an unfortunate circumstance, but I would probably caution the board and even the applicant from engaging in that conversation, because we don't want whatever decision the board makes to appear to have been tied in any way to whatever may happen with that funding.
It was stated up here.
No, I understand.
Saying it was stated, but it's not something that really we should be considering in our decision making.
Mm-hmm.
So, and with that, if you could introduce yourself and state your name and address for the record, I think.
Good evening. My name is Jesse Sagnor. I live at 899 Northwest 37th Avenue in Delray Beach. I am an urban planning professor at FAU, but probably the proudest role I have is serving as chairman or chairperson of the Delray Beach Housing Authority. In terms of responding to the comment about for sale housing, I don't think anybody disagrees. In fact, this site has been the location for 3 different attempts to build for sale fee simple housing. Every single time it has failed due to the level of risk, the inability to package all the financing together in a way that makes sense. For sale housing that is affordable in the state of Florida is similar to an endangered species. The things that have to come together for that deal to work are extremely rare. The Housing Authority has attempted to do this since at least 2010. The move to rental is because that need, which you stated, is significant and ongoing and getting worse when you think about where the housing prices have gone, as opposed to the fact that salaries have maybe increased 2% in the last year. Housing at the state level has increased 16%. In South Florida, you're talking more along the lines of 30%. If you look at the jobs in Delray Beach, 28.7% of those people have jobs in hospitality, in retail. So this housing, when we talk about extremely low, very low income, that's 100% of our housing, not workforce, which is 80% to 120%. So I just wanted to reaffirm that. So when I was shaking my head, it was basically for clarification that yes, we're not talking about workforce housing, we're talking about below that. I do understand the points that you make about biking. Oh, go ahead.
Do you mind if I just interject?
Sure.
I appreciate the information, but I've served in the city of West Palm, Boynton Beach, and the city of Delray in economic development and redevelopment. Right. I understand what you're trying to say. What I'm particularly asking is, if we're not doing workforce housing and affordable housing, that's fine with me. And I understand this is not our goal tonight, whether I just wanted to state for the record that I just think they should be fee simple housing. If you can't make the numbers work, I understand that. But there are some things that has happened with the AARP package and funding at the federal level that potentially could help with fee simple housing. Maybe not this project, but is potentially possible. So it is not as rare as it had been even 2 or 3 years ago. So let's park that for a moment. Okay. So if it is not our goal tonight, and it is not my goal tonight to change that, right? If it's going to remain rental for low-income housing and very low-income housing, I want this project to work for the potential target markets that are going to use the project.
Correct.
Okay? And some of those elements that will not work, that has been proposed as a solution that I take umbrage to, is I know we need a few bicycle racks, that's fine. The bus and the terminology that needs quantifying for me, reasonable walking distance. For whom?
Right.
And at what time of year?
So let's not get caught up on whether I think it should be fee simple or not. That's just it's a thing, okay? Let's put that aside. So let's have this project, however, work for, in Florida, low-income folks and very low-income folks do not have any less cars,
I agree.
okay? So I'm going to relinquish those are my concerns that I would like us to discuss tonight, because for this project, and the young lady that came up and was asking some questions but wasn't quite sure how to ask the question, I'll ask the question. It's going to increase loitering. It's going to increase a police issue with people gathering outside and some of the other things. So we need to design projects that work for the target market. On-street parking encourages cars that are not operable, right? And there's nothing we can do about it because it's on-street parking. So let's have that conversation and make this project the best project for that target market. Okay?
Thank you. Sir,
we
sir,
agree. Oh,
sir.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. John?
No, wow. Definitely spinning my head in a different direction with all the comments you made. Thank you, Matt. I think that's the big general challenge that's going on right now with this situation. How do we attract developers to come in and do certain items? We talked about open space versus living space. How do you accomplish the living space? You create porches. Now you're taking away AC areas potentially for people that are living there. My questions are the application process. How are the locals going to be served on that? Making sure that the people that are going into those places are from Delray. Can anybody just shed a little light on that, or?
Certainly, Michael Hensey, 198 Northeast 6th Avenue, representing the developer. Yes, so I don't know if you saw on the slide, but there is a preference on the unit. You have to have a preference on the units. You can't designate the units to people. That's against fair housing. We have a preference for hometown heroes. Now, where did we get this hometown heroes from? We represent the Sarasota Housing Authority, and we just built a 128 unit development, workforce and affordable, of mixed income housing, 30% AMI up to 120. So what did we do? We took the hometown heroes preference for nurses, firefighters, EMTs, police officers in the city area, and they receive a preference on the unit. So when they submit their application for a lease, they get the preference on the unit before another person would get that.
And I'm going to interrupt you right here. Do we really think that these are going to be hometown heroes in the type of pricing income bracket that we're talking about?
So I think there's a little bit.
They are indeed, at that level, they're not going to meet that criteria.
So I think there's a little confusion here because of the Delray standards on very low income housing and low income housing compared to how we quantify affordable housing as affordable housing developers. So in Delray, it's 60% or below. We have units at 30, 60, and 70% and 80% of the Palm Beach County AMI. We actually have rental levels, I think, on here. It's tough to see, but these are based on the 2022 tax credit rents. So the project is financed with a federal, state, and local funds. These are the 2022 tax credit rents. We ordered these ahead of them being available to the public. We paid money to get them for this presentation. This is what the rents will be at all those levels for all the units, and you can see that in there. Okay, and then there's also a little bit of for the 1s, 2s, and 3s, average in Delray right now compared to our prices.
So again, the question I'm asking is, do we really think that we're going to have Delray Beach police officers or Delray Beach firefighters or Delray Beach teachers in the units as you're proposing them, given the nature of the project that's been proposed?
Yes.
Sorry.
If you could just state your name and address for the record. And were you sworn in before?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Anybody else? By the authority vested in me as a notary of the state of Florida, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jacqueline Fernandez. I'm the Vice President of Operations for the Delray Housing Group, the property management arm. This is extremely heartfelt. So thank you for letting us be here tonight. It is about our families. On the affordable side, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the Housing Authority. I'm going to speak on behalf of our nonprofit. We have over 900 families on our waiting list, waiting for housing. We had previously till tonight over 50 people on our for sale piece, all of which we've been communicating with, all of which were not approved for home ownership, all of which are hoping and praying that someday they'll be ready for home ownership. But the truth is that they're not ready today, and they're not going to be ready in a year or two from now. Most of our families have lost their jobs. Thank God to the Palm Beach County system paying for rental assistance. Thank God for the Housing Authority and those families on Section 8. But today we are here to beg you to let us build these 60 affordable units. They will serve. We will offer Delray residents first. The preference is the people on our waiting list. And about 45% of those people are your people right here in Delray Beach. That's all I wanted to say is we have a huge need for affordable housing. Please don't close the door on us because you're closing the doors on your residents. A lot of them are already homeless and sleeping in their cars. Thank you.
Thank you.
So does it answer your question?
Sorry, John, I had
No,
that.
I totally understand. It's a very important issue. On that note, and kind of dovetailing on everything, how will the management? That's kind of my biggest concern is management once it's operable. We do have concerns here. Security. Are there going to be amenities offered potentially for daycare? Things like that. I see what Annette's saying about the potential, but I think if it's managed properly, we can mitigate a lot of that. So that's kind of my concern, if you could address that.
We have been in the property management business for over 15, 16 years. This is our specialty. This type of income is what we specialize in. We will provide security. The property will be security. The other two properties have security. We're going to up security within the three properties. In other words, it's not going to be one heartfelt expense on any one property. It's going to be a shared expense for our properties. Property management, I always say, let the property managers do their job. If you have a property manager doing their job, you're not going to have crime. You're not going to let the families loiter. We can't control what's around us, but we can control our families. By what? By addressing our lease and enforcing our lease. I think we're a proven track record right now with Village Square Family. We haven't had much incidents there. But again, we can't protect all classes. We can only protect inside our property. And that we can promise you because we are the face of that agency. And it's us that we get the calls, we get the answers, and if something goes wrong, you're going to look at us. We're not going to let the city down when it comes to our residents. We are committed to making this work, and we're committed because we're not going anywhere. Someday she will retire, our CEO. Someday I'll retire, but guess what? The agency will still be standing. So that's the difference between what we're committed to do.
Just want to clarify for the board that she's referring to the Delray Housing Group, which is the nonprofit arm for the Delray Beach Housing Authority. They're the property managers who currently manage the Village Square Phase 1 and 2.
Thank you.
Are there any plans for daycare amenities or things like that to be available?
No, but we facilitate the information. We partner with surrounding daycares in our area. I have 3 connections right now that we work with. We refer them to. Sometimes there's waiting lists, sometimes there's not, but we will not be offering the daycares on site.
Okay, are there any mechanisms for accountability with the city in regards to that? Any benchmarks or any particular ways to address?
We are required on an annual basis, the Delray Beach Housing Authority side of things provides to the city our annual plan. In your annual plan, it also speaks of the nonprofit arm, which is the Delray Housing Group. You would see whatever is going on throughout the year. That's how you would know what's going on as far as the city itself.
Okay, thank you. And I know this is probably out of the purvey of what we're here, and when it comes down to what we are here for, the architecture, I definitely approve of it. Landscaping, from what I can see as a layman, it looks good. I'll defer to Ms. Perez on some of the particulars on that. As a person who lives in Lake Ida and has seen all this influx of money and the housing I'm a realtor, and 50% year over year is what we're looking. That is incredible. And for all these people that are moving here, whether you're local or now you're local, I think there is a great opportunity to address this need. And I just want to make sure that we do it the right way and that we do it with care and with love. And I hear what Annette's saying and trying to make the best decision I can for myself and for the city from my position up here on the SPRAB board is what I'm trying to do. Just some minor stuff, the speed bumps, I'm not a big fan of those. There's other ways to calm that. And the reason why I'm not a big fan of the speed bumps is because any car, no matter how good or how bad, eventually you're going over those speed bumps on a constant basis. I just replaced the shocks on my FJ Cruiser. That's what happens. Even if you're going the regulation speed, that up and down. So, there are other ways. I know Europe does things where they kind of zigzag the road a little bit. I'm not sure if there's any, where they move the parking from one side to the other, kind of create a natural slowing down. I'm not sure if that's something that could be addressed as far into the game. It's really not what we're here to talk about, just kind of my 2 cents. But yeah, with all this money and all these people that are coming down from the Northeast, I walk through Lake Ida now, and I don't know half the people walking their dogs anymore. So if we can rally behind this as a community and do something positive for the folks that I feel are being forgotten or left behind, I think it would go a long way. That's really all I have on that. Thank you.
Mr. Poppy, did you have some comments you wanted to make?
Yeah, Scott Poppy, Principal Planner for the City of Delray Beach. A couple of stray thoughts, and I kind of struggle with whether to provide them to the board or not. And the one thing I wanted to say from a planning perspective, I don't discriminate between multiple family, whether it's for sale or for rent. I believe all people deserve the same dignity and quality development, whether it's one or the other. I do understand the sentiment about for sale versus rental. That does provide, or can provide, a stepping stone to break the cycle of poverty, the for sale. Don't have quite the same thought process with rental. However, it does provide, rental does provide quality, or it can provide quality housing, which is a urgent and important need for Delray as well as the county. So I do understand that. I would suggest to the board that as board members, you're reviewing the site plan. Setbacks, height, quality of architecture, landscaping. They are currently going through a conditional use process to have that reviewed for the increase in the density of the project, which is tied to, in this case, the very low sector of our peoples. I would almost suggest that this conversation, while important and needed, is also tied to that conditional use, and may be more appropriate with the conditional use rather than as a site plan conversation. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Net?
I need just a quick clarification about the parking. So if we follow Scott's guidelines and come back to what we're charged with, what I'm trying to get a handle on is what are we talking about in terms of a variance on the parking? Because I'm seeing 114 versus 116. Are we really talking about 2 spots?
Talking about
1.9.
141 versus 116.
I think that was 2.35 per unit down to 1.9 per unit.
There you
I believe
go.
Was the 1.9 per
There you
unit?
go.
1.9.
What
So-
we would be at?
Yeah. So if we talk about just that, I would not be on board with the variance on the parking, because that is based on a premise, an ill-based premise of a more urban area, the places that are cited in the historic law of reduction of parking or increase in density. I don't think that's a good fit for Florida and South Florida. That's too great a variance for me.
And I don't disagree with you. I was interested in what they were saying about the additional parking available on the other portions of the prior elements of this project, the 1 and 2. But when I'm looking at what I see from the site plan, I don't see an easy connection to that parking. There's, if you're parking over in the far parking lot, let's say, you still have to cross the road in the rain or in the heat and rain or whatever it is. I don't think we can condition our promises on parking that exists in another project. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bennett, but.
In the past, the city has done off-site parking agreements where there's 2 different entities. It's not something I've seen happen from the dais. Typically, the applicant comes to the presentation or with the application with that already in place. I can't remember the name of the project, but there was a restaurant just south of Atlantic that had just 2 parking spaces in the back, and they did a similar agreement with an office complex to use the parking in the evening. So they only serve dinner, so as an example. But the city could do an off-site parking agreement that would, in essence, allow them to count those spaces, assuming the other entity has excess parking on paper, not just by study.
And just a point of clarification, there were 2 parking studies provided that are
If
local.
you could.
Oh,
Yeah, there's a lot of emotion here, I think. So please get my attention, ask for the permission to speak, and then I'll grant it.
oh, my apologies.
Yes.
May I
Please go
have the
ahead.
permission? Thank you so much. I just wanted to make a point of clarification that there were 2 parking studies provided to you that are local, and that's the Delray Boynton study that shows that the actual use is 78 parking spaces, and then also the Village Square 1 and 2 that shows that the parking rate is 1.3 spaces. So I just wanted to make that point of clarification that all the parking studies provided to you tonight are not outside of the state in urban areas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Annette, you got your extra point there, I think you wanted to bring up. Was there anything else you had? I'm going to go on to Dana if you're.
I think I'm just, if I can.
We'll go back
with
around
the
again, but if.
landscaping.
Yeah.
That's fine, yeah.
Dana?
So, yeah, I guess, thank you so much for all those comments and for all this effort. I think it's difficult when, we're part of the SPRAB board and there's so much more that goes into a huge project like this. But the parking, I'd love to hear from the professor again on the parking, because it is a bit confusing given what's going on nationally, what's going on in Florida, what's going on locally. I think it was mentioned at some point that typically lower income rental housing only requires one spot. And then I think the young lady just said that in the local study, it was 1.3 spots. So can you kind of just, how does that work with a family? With two people working? I'm a little bit, I'm not a little bit, I'm with Annette on, I don't understand how the dynamics work. Do they share a car generally? I mean,
To some extent, there's a cost affiliated with owning a car. So if you think about at a lower income level, they do not have as much disposable income. So things like gas, which is skyrocketing right now, makes it expensive. Auto insurance, which they're supposed to have, makes it expensive. So in terms of having multiple cars, we're talking about an income dynamic that most people in this room might not be familiar with. It is not easy. In terms of Delray Beach, a lot of residents that live in our current housing, 60% of their income is just based on gas, car, and shelter.
which percent, sorry?
60%.
60%.
Yes.
Gas, car, and shelter.
Right. And that's it. That doesn't include things like health insurance if they have access to it. So going back to your question about parking, it is a different parking dynamic than, let's say, some of the higher end developments that have been built in Delray Beach. Getting back to the parking thing, the other issue is that if you build more parking, most developments that are not affordable housing in Delray Beach can pass that cost on to the consumer. Our consumer doesn't have any income. So when we're trying to do these projects as best as possible based on all the guidelines that the city has available to us, we're trying to maximize it and control the costs in a way that provides pride for our residents that live in these developments. To flip the switch a little bit, just going back to parking. So one parking space, surface parking space, costs about $5,000. If you take 1.5 parking spaces, that removes a 2-bedroom affordable housing unit from a development like this. So then let's say you talk about structured parking. Well, structured parking, you're talking more along the lines of $25,000 to $35,000 per each parking spot. But we're talking about affordable housing. So a lot of the parking options that are available to a lot of other typical developments are not available to affordable housing. So when you look at the changes or differences or allowances, whatever you want to call it, instead of having, let's say, 2 spots per unit, they say 1 spot per unit. The reason why is because affordable housing can't be built based on typical traditional zoning code guidelines.
Okay, so that's the development, but then can you elaborate a little bit on what you were saying about the family and the use and the cost for them? And then, so basically, if it's a typical family with 2 parents and children,
Right.
share a car.
Yes, a better example is if we look at many of my students that I've had at FAU, a lot of them are lower income. Some nights they don't make it to class because they don't have access to cars. It was already mentioned we don't necessarily have the best infrastructure network related to train, Tri-Rail, and everything else. So that is an actual issue where people have to make choices because there's only one car. And I've seen this firsthand being a professor at FAU since 2013. And so based on that, there are issues. There are always exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, most families do not have 4, 5, even 2 cars. So because of that, they have less need for the additional parking spaces that you might have in a traditional development.
Okay, thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Let me ask another question, not of you. If we could ask the CEO of the Housing Authority to come up. On your waiting list, can you characterize the nature of the families that are on there? Are they typically nuclear families as we expect in America with 2 parents and 2.4 kids, or?
So, Chair might actually steer the board away from that conversation. One of the things that was talked about earlier, guaranteeing that this is a Delray Beach family, et cetera. They do have the Fair Housing Act, which prohibits discrimination, and I wouldn't want the board to have a conversation about what families will or will not potentially be in these units.
I understand
and have that
your
effect.
point, Mr. Bennett. I'm actually trying to go in the other direction, which I think applies to the parking question that's been raised. So I understand your concern. Maybe we'll cut things off if we feel like we're getting too far in the weeds there, but I'd like to get at least a general sense.
So maybe the question is more about the standard number of occupants that are on the waiting list to occupy
Number of
these.
occupants, and yes, it's a great way to put it.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Shirley Avazo. I'm the Chief Executive of the Delray Beach Housing Authority. My address is 19623 Split Rail Run, Wellington, Florida 33414. Yes, the occupancy standard for a 2-bedroom unit is four individual. It could be a mother, a parent, and 2 children. We normally have on our waiting list families that qualify for 2-bedroom units is 2 children and 1 adult. Basically, that's the standard for a 2-bedroom unit. So we have a single mom with 2 children. On a 3-bedroom unit, we have a single mom with up to 4 children. 1 car, 1 household, 1 car, 1 household. You don't see a multitude of families, low income, I'm talking about low income, with multiple cars. You usually see one household, 1 car. And this is an opportunity, I want to segue, this is an opportunity for us to provide housing for our residents in Delray. We are encouraging you all to consider this application because I've been at the Housing Authority for over 27 years, and I see the need, especially now, the need for housing, affordable housing. We get calls every day, emails, overwhelming emails of families needing housing. And we don't want to push our families out of Delray. We want to bring them back to Delray. And we need them to live in affordable housing. So I ask you to please consider the site plan approval.
So while we have you here, a couple more questions that I have on my list. How long is your waiting list in years, and is it currently open?
Our waiting list is closed. It's been closed since 2010. In 2010, we opened up the waiting list and we received 7,000 applications. We were only able to take 1,000 through a random selection procedure. We housed 1,000 families. I currently have about 98 people on my Section 8 waiting list, but we have almost 2,000 residents, over 2,000 people waiting for the project-based waiting list, and for the affordable housing, we have over 1,000. Now, we're waiting, families are calling every single day wanting to get on our list, and we can't because we're so limited. We're so limited with affordable housing. Our vouchers we're almost at 100% of all our vouchers occupied. Units are very limited. Mm-hmm. So I ask that we please, on behalf of the people and the families, please consider our site plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And do you have more questions or comments?
No, so I just want to clarify also the trees on the street. You're applying for a variance for 20 less, but then you're planning on 17 interior. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah. So the requirement for the street trees was 43 trees. We could only fit 20 with the on-street parking, which we did actually increase from what is there existing for the on-street parking on the 2 side streets. We did accommodate 17 additional interior trees to the site, tried to maximize as much plantable space. But as the board could attest to, there's only so much you can plant. If there's further questions about that, I could invite our landscape architect up to answer.
I'm okay.
Okay, thank you.
Carol, sounds like a good entree point for you. You want to jump in?
Okay. Annette, thank you for all your insight. Got everybody thinking a lot tonight. Will there be cameras on the building? Is that,
Yes, there will be cameras on the building, and as mentioned before, there will be shared security, particularly in the nighttime, with Village Square phases 1 and 2. So one consistent security group for the 3 portions of the project.
okay, because someone did mention that, on your site, you will have security and I guess you're going to employ someone for that. However, half your parking, or I don't know what percentage of parking is not on your property, it's street parking.
Correct.
So those cars are not protected by your property. That's just, so if your car gets parked there and someone's window's out, they can't call the apartment complex and say, hey, there's a problem here. That's really a city problem, right?
Please.
I think Mr. Poppy wants to respond to that, judging from the way.
He's leaving.
He's running the other way, sorry.
He wants to leave now.
He's going the other direction.
So anyway, that was my thought. So you will probably run into this problem because it happens all the time. It happens in people's driveways in the highest end houses, and it'll happen on the street everywhere. So that's why I was wondering about the cameras.
So yes,
They really should have every angle going around all 4 sides of the property.
we can work with the housing authority and the development team to ensure that there is adequate security camera coverage. As also noted, we are improving the lighting by actually installing lighting on the 2 side streets, 12th and 13th, on the east and west sides of the property. And just one point of note, because I did not mention it in our proposal, we're talking about a lot of security items and the community here. There's nothing worse for security than a vacant site. The vacant site already has some perimeter on-street parking. Developing this site will provide for the vibrancy and the foot traffic, the eyes that are going to be out and about that you would not have normally if it remains undeveloped. So definitely, security not only with cameras, but also with increased people and livelihood around the area.
So with the parking situation, I know you have your overflow parking. It's a long way away. We saw the map. I mean, you'd need to take your bicycle to get to the car that you dropped off, at the very corner of the other site. I suppose if someone had a car and they wanted to park it, they could use the overflow parking, but they're really out of luck to be so far away from the resident, or their home. I think your outdoor spaces could use a little help as far as amenities go. How big is the pool? It looks really small.
I don't recall offhand. I know we did size it based on the code.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably close to what the minimum is for the required number of units, but I could ask Tricia to come up and elaborate on that.
Okay, well, I think one thing we've learned in the past 2 years is that our outdoor spaces are extremely important to us. And I don't think that your outdoor spaces are being taken advantage of in the way that they could be taken advantage of. I think that tot lot's great, but yeah, you're going to have a bunch of 12-year-olds and 14-year-olds sitting around. They're not going to be playing cornhole. They're going to be sitting around on their phones talking. They're going to need areas to sit, areas to be outside. They're going to need shade. They're going to need and something fun. I mean, look at the apartments that are being built everywhere. They have great amenities. This should be no different. It doesn't take much. A pool's great. Your clubhouse is fantastic. But I think you can do more, especially with the lost area, the cornhole area, I'm going to call it. Do something in there and have a little bit more fun with that. As far as the landscape goes, I think it's a good plan. The only thing that bothers me is on the sides of the buildings on Southwest 8th and 10th. There's no verticality there. I think some sable palms on the ends of those buildings would really help out, especially because you've used crepe myrtles, which are going to lose their leaves and be deciduous probably a good 3 months out of the year, so you're going to have nothing on that side. Southwest 10th is a heavily traveled street. Those buildings are very close to the street, and it's going to be prominent. So I would encourage you, really to come back and come back in a couple weeks and figure out your outdoor spaces a little more. Put some sable palms on the ends or some sable palms on the ends of those buildings. And what else was it? Are you at your maximum impervious area here? Do you have room for some more patio spaces, or?
We're not quite maxed out on impervious area. As Ms. Desari mentioned, we are under our coverage from an impervious-pervious calculation. We're providing more open space. There is some potential possibility. I'm looking, in the area. Let's see, I can point here. In the area, surrounding what we have as the cornhole designated area, there's probably some additional space there. We're just very space limited on site to try and maximize the number of units within those houses to be able to provide that. I think that area we could potentially provide some patio area if that was.
Yeah, I think over by the playground, I mean, you're going to need benches, you're going to need seating for, if it's at a tot lot, you're going to have adults standing around. And if it's a lot of little kids there, you're going to have a lot of adults. So you're going to need some more things going on there. One other thing, how many bikes can you accommodate?
I believe we had 6 short-term spaces, and let me pull up my site plan real quick. So for the short term, we had 3 spaces required, and we provided 6. And the long term, the permanent storage is 16 spaces.
And those are bike lockers?
Yes. Well, it's within an enclosed, fully enclosed, secured structure accommodated with the mail kiosk in this location. So the mail kiosk is on the south side. And then there's the fully enclosed with walls on each side, roof, bike storage area. So it's got locked doors.
Okay.
But it's one universal key for the one area.
Correct.
So it's not individual lockers for individual bikes. And is there individual locking capability within there?
Yes, we have the rack inside. So you would lock your bike to that rack with your own personal lock.
Okay.
And everyone else will have to take their bikes up into their,
once that's,
I guess, their apartments if they need to. Okay, and what else was there? I think that answers my questions, Jason. I'm okay with the tree. What, you needed a waiver, or what was that, a variance, or?
For the street trees, yes.
Yeah, I think that's okay. You have provided a lot of trees on site, and then, of course, you've got the extra 17. I think if you add a couple more trees to the ends, that will help out in that number also. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. Stephen?
All right. So I'm going to try to keep it within the parameters of this board. I'm just curious, why do you need to get rid of 23 trees? Like, I don't understand why.
Yeah, so
what it is about the street.
With the street trees, we'd be required to put them on the exterior of the property where we have all the parallel parking that is going towards that parking count number of that 116 spaces that we discussed. There is already existing on-street parking. It's actually about 40 spaces between the 2 streets, and we're increasing that to 50 spaces. Just to try and maximize as much parking as possible and minimize that request for the parking reduction. With that, we're limited on our street trees that we can provide within the right-of-way. And as you can see on this graphic, outside of the right-of-way, we're trying to maximize as many trees as possible. That's where that additional 17 comes in.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. And, I'm not going to second-guess the architect, but I was just curious because it's kind of like a very long shaped plot, you know, and the entrances are at the long ends. Is that a decision you made to put those, the north and south entrances like that versus east and west instead?
I'm sorry, you mentioned the entrances are on
No,
the long
I'm sorry.
ends?
Look at the overall site plan, including the landscaping. Yeah. So there's an entrance on the left and on the right, which is actually north and south.
Oh, sorry, the vehicular entrance.
Vehicular.
Okay, yes.
Vehicular, yes. Was that a intentional decision to? It just made more sense to have them like that?
Yes, yeah. Again, to maximize space on the buildings, we try to push the buildings out close to the right-of-way, as close as we could get them. And we have that central access core, which also permits the access to the interior parking lots. So, yeah, that central spine is necessary for that. We also did not connect these parking lots to the adjacent roadways. Two reasons. One, for the on-street parking, and two, to reduce the number of entrances to the side streets. So we did want to cluster that into the center spine there.
Right. Are there any fences around, or no, it's just sidewalk?
No fences, just sidewalks, yes.
Rick Gonzalez, I'm the architect for the project, REG Architects, 120 South Olive Avenue, downtown West Palm Beach. We followed, obviously, the principles for new urbanism, which is something that the city of Delray Beach does with the leadership here. And so that's why the on-street parking, the alley is the safest way to have eyes on the street, too, with the parking on both sides of the, it's more than an alley, you know, it's wider than an alley. It would have been nice if it was tighter, but it's very tight, so the cars can't go very fast. You know, that's also on purpose. And having the entrances on the south and the north way is also great security for the site, you know, and avoiding those other opportunities. So the buildings are on the edges, protecting the neighborhood in the middle, where, you know, where the kids and the families can enjoy the amenities for the site. And the prior design, by the way, did not have a swimming pool, had a very, very small clubhouse. And in defense of the client, she paid for a full set of construction documents. And we bid that 6-8 different contractors 2 years ago. We really tried, Annette. We really, really tried. We were so, I mean, I designed those units like I would have loved to have lived in one of those, you know, with 2-car garages, 3 stories, beautiful buildings. We just couldn't finance it, you know?
I've moved on from that.
Okay. All right, but I just wanted to share that because, you know, this is the second time around. Thank you.
Okay, and just one of the criteria, you said 1.9 spots per, for the 2 bedrooms?
Yes.
I don't really understand 1.9 spots. Is that like 2 spots, 1 spot? Or?
That's what it averages out to.
What is, but is.
You have to use smart cars.
One car shares one.
Yeah, that's what the numbers in the math averages out to, with the number of spaces we can provide, which is the 116 on site, divided by the number of total units. So that ends up averaging out to, you know, the 1.9 spaces per unit overall. The city's code requirement for 2 and 3 bedroom is to provide 2 spaces, but then you also provide additional for guests on an increasing scale depending on the number of units. So that's where, you know, we aggregated those numbers just to say, what's your total parking supply that you can provide and what would be the number of units. Yeah.
All right. I on it. That's it.
All right.
Thank you.
I guess it's my turn then. So jumping on the parking bandwagon a little bit more, if I recall the neighborhood well, which I think I do, there's not a lot of other street parking nearby. It's all individual resident areas. So if the parking here gets full, I come in late at night and I've worked until 2 a.m. in my job in doing dishes in downtown Delray, which is, you know, not improbable here. And I go to find a parking space. Where do I go?
If you're living in this facility?
And it's full.
So, and Shirley or Jackie could come in and correct me if I'm wrong, but when a tenant has an apartment in this facility, they will actually have a parking space assigned to them. So we would have an understanding of what the demand is. So let's say we fill up all 60 and everyone has 2 cars, that would exceed our 116 spaces. That's when we would utilize that overflow parking within the Village Square Phase 1 and 2.
Okay, so there's enough interior spaces so that there will be an assigned space for every unit, 1 space per unit. Is that what I'm understanding you to say?
We've got 56, or I'm sorry, we have 66 spaces on the interior, and then there's 50 on the on-street parking. So yes, we do have enough to accommodate all the interior.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, that's helpful. I agree with Carol on the cornhole. I mean, you know, they're not going to be great for sitting on. They may be useful as skateboard ramps, but I don't see them being used much for cornhole. I think there's better things that can be done with that outdoor space that's going to be more useful for the residents that are likely to be living here. And when we get to that point, we may, you know, want to think about what that could be, but we'll leave that in your hands to think about if we get there. Any attempts for doing more with the buildings themselves as far as LEED, green, solar, et cetera? I really didn't see much in there with that.
So I could invite Rick or Michael up to talk a little bit more in detail, but between what we've seen and observed on many of our other recent projects, we're not pursuing LEED or a Green Globes or other type of certification. That ends up, I'll say anecdotally in my experience, being a lot of money thrown to get a plaque on the wall.
Right.
We always are employing and doing our design with green building techniques and sustainable techniques, local materials, local and native plantings, and recycled and as much potential reused material that we can from a site structure, civil standpoint, like my expertise. But we're not pursuing any of those, but we are employing those types of techniques in our design.
Okay, and go ahead.
Sorry, Jason. As part of Florida Housing Finance Corporation's requirements, we are actually going to receive a green certification plaque. We will be meeting the ICC 700 National Green Building Standard, and we are on track right now with our green consultant to receive our silver certification based on our drawings.
Excellent. Good to hear. Thank you.
Sorry, Jason.
You learned something new about your own project.
Good to know.
And what color are the roof tiles, and any opportunity of doing solar up there on the roofs, or?
Actually, yep, we've got our material board here. Actually, Rick, do you want to maybe address that?
So just for record purposes, we are going to need you to speak into a mic if you're going to reference the board.
So we have a shingle roof. It's a gray multi-tone finish. And we are getting we do have a green consultant that Jason didn't know, just knew. And solar is not part of the equation on that. It's for a rental property, it's a little, I don't think it's something that the client's done before, for this location.
Okay.
But everything else will, the mechanicals, the flooring, the bus stop, Tri-Rail being so close, it gets a lot of points for site access. It's in a very good location.
And the tile, what you're showing here looks like a kind of medium gray, which is not a highly reflective.
Yes, it's not a dark color.
Okay. Let's see. We talked about bike parking already. Any thought given to any electrical vehicle spaces? I know this is not a target audience for that, but I think anytime we start talking about parking, and especially when you're asking for parking concessions, we're shifting that direction. And there's going to be used vehicles coming on the market in the near future, and we're talking a long-term project. So
we did not make any particular accommodations for EV spaces, and especially given the parking reduction, we didn't want to try and restrict certain spaces, or especially, like you mentioned, may not actually be able to be utilized by our clientele. So that was not a part of our considerations for the project.
All right, I mean, when I looked at the site plan and I tried to think about, is there places where you could run that wiring in the future? How feasible is that? It wasn't clear to me that that was going to be something that was going to be super feasible, but that's something, again, you know, we're talking a project that's likely to stand for 20 years. I fully expect in 10 years, we're going to have a massive shift in the type of vehicles we see on the road. So, you know, even a project like this, we're going to be shifting away from gasoline. So,
Yeah.
Can I speak? Can I speak?
yes.
So yes, we have started employing, like you said, we're running actually in a project up in St. Augustine, we are running the conduit, although it was not part of the original site plan. We have added it, knowing that where we're going down the road. So yes, we can certainly always look into adding electrical vehicle chargers to the site and running the conduit there for eventual install down the line.
Okay. That would be something I would certainly want to see in an approved project. Architecture, ends of the buildings, the north and south ends of the buildings in particular. It seems like there could be more that was done with those. The rest of the building is attractive. There's a lot of interesting features. There is a slide that shows them, I think. Rendering, not a rendering, but
I don't think I actually included the north and south elevations on the main buildings, just the
I
clubhouse.
think there was one in our package then.
Oh,
Okay.
here's. Cool. Thank you.
That's the clubhouse, so that's, yeah. So there's some nice detail on the east and west sides, and certainly plenty of nice detail on the clubhouse, but on the north and south ends of the buildings, I did not see that same level of detail. Looked like just a couple of smallish windows, so.
Those are, again, Rick Gonzalez, the architect, those are, the end walls are where the beds will be located, and also the AC units for each one of the apartments are gonna be outside. So we kept the openings to a minimum on that facade to avoid the noise from the air conditioning units.
Can you get that just a little bit bigger so we can
you
see
blow it
the,
up? The middle one?
Screen.
There you go.
there we go. So again, it seems like there just could be more done there. I mean, even sometimes with paint or additional faux detailing or, you know.
It has detail, it's just hard to see at that scale.
There's louvers, there's faux louvers.
Right, we have louvers, we have joints, we have stucco banding. That drawing is just really small, it's hard to tell. We have shutters at the ends. And I don't know if that picture can be blown up anymore, maybe here.
Yeah, let me escape from presentation mode.
Let me see if I've got it.
Okay, I have it.
Maybe.
I guess there's more, a little more there than meets the eye initially, but,
Mr. Gonzalez, I have it up there.
you know, even in the buildings that have spots of color, we were talking the blue and the orange, but there's no color on the ends. It seems like there could be more that could be done with that.
We've got the stucco banding, the change in colors, shutters, and then the 4 windows, and then these are the bed walls right over here, right over here.
Okay.
What's not shown here is that the AC units are at that location down below. And there's also score joints, horizontal and vertical.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that picture is hard to see.
Yeah, do you want to take it around to the other board members so they can also see?
These are the details, vertical, horizontal. Right here at the end, the 4 ends.
I mean, they don't really make a lot of sense there because they're not tied to anything, but I guess that's, yeah.
Well, they tie into the front, you know, they bring
Sure,
the turning, what
sure.
we're doing there is turning the corner with the shutters.
Right, and what color are they going to be?
Would you, it would be possible for you to go back to the mic, just to answer the questions?
On the blue building, it'll be the blue, and on
Okay.
the gray, it'll be the tangerine.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right. I did very much like the point about having a barbecue area. I think that is going to be critical. You know, just thinking about how people use the space. Cornhole, no. Barbecue, yes. Maybe that's the right place to put a couple of public barbecue grills. They want to drag their charcoal out there and use them, whatever. If it doesn't work, you replace them over time, whatever. I'm going to say, I very much agree with Annette's sentiment about wishing the original project could have worked out. And I fully understand that you tried very, very hard to make that work. It was a beautiful project. I think any one of us in this room would have been happy to have lived there. I want this project to be something that Delray Beach can be proud of as well, because we're going to be living with it for a long time. Now that you're not right here, I'll take the mask off again. I'm still concerned that we're not quite there yet. I think there are still some things that can be done to get us there. And I think we've heard from some of the questions that have been asked, maybe some minor improvements that may help a little bit. So I can't speak for the rest of the board. I can only speak for myself. But I feel like it may be appropriate for you to come back before us in a couple of weeks or in a month, and having taken the feedback that we've given, maybe make some minor adjustments rather than us having to do a up or down vote at this time. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that, and you may have to talk amongst yourselves briefly before you can answer that. But that's where I am right now. Annette, yes, go ahead.
While they're conferring, COVID-19 did something to the family structure. It has taken us back to multi-generational living in the same unit. I agree with Todd. Come back and readdress the parking. If I had to vote now, I would say yes, no to the
living
parking.
areas, the
Because
bicycles,
that family unit, you're asking $2,373 for the 3-bedroom. And there's some emotional comments, and I'm not going back down this socioeconomic path. The fact of the matter is, the parking is going to be an issue because you're going to have 1 or 2 generations sharing this. I know what the lease is going to say. Okay? I know what the lease is going to say, but the reality of what's going to happen on that property is going to be very different. It's going to be very different. We can try to get as close as we can. It won't be perfect, but I would really like to see the parking readdressed for those reasons. The shortages, the families coming back together on the same property. Yeah.
I'm not as concerned about the parking as I think some others are. I understand your point, but I do think that, we're probably are talking about mom, maybe grandma, 2-3 kids. They will reach teenage years, and they will maybe some of them will get cars, but I don't think it's going to be as desperate. And I think having a dedicated parking space helps. But there are some other issues here also that I think we need to think about. So, thoughts, comments?
I'd just like to add, as somebody who was raised by a single mom, I can feel the emotion in these people's voices, and I have it myself, and I know some people that are involved with the project. We're all coming from good intention. Mm-hmm. This needs to get built.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. How much delay is this going to add?
I was gonna request if the board would be acceptable to this, that any changes that we're requesting. I heard some sable palms to provide some additional trees and scale, the teen amenity change. Beyond that, I don't recall any specific other additional changes. Would the board be acceptable to making those conditions of approval that we could get with staff and ensure that they're addressed on the certification set?
I'd certainly like to see the conduit done for potential of...
in the conduit, yes.
The electric.
Yeah, we do it off the clubhouse, probably
exactly.
off that north side into some of these spaces.
Got that parking spot, the parking area right there adjacent to that, yep.
So, Chair, I will give my typical
Please.
response on this path. It's very difficult for the board to fully understand what the changes will be without having it be presented. Sometimes it's something simple, add 2 sable palms on the north and south side of the most buildings on the farthest north and south sides, and there's a semi-agreement that everybody seems to understand. Changing the exterior use areas and what that looks like and how big it should be or shouldn't be, what should or shouldn't be in those areas, that's going to be very difficult and quite frankly would involve design from the dais. I would advise this board not to proceed with conditions to address the concerns that they've raised. I do think that if the board's not comfortable with those, the applicant has the right to proceed with a vote yes or no. So if they need to, then they can go that route and see what happens, and they have the right to appeal a denial if that would be what happens with the board. But the concerns that this board have raised, I would not advise the board to place conditions to address those, but have a more detailed or a modified plan to be presented.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. So, board members.
Which option? Move to approval or no option? Or what?
I would like to move to continue with direction, and for the applicant to come back in 2 weeks. We meet every 2 weeks with some of the suggestions that we've said, and
so before any official motion would be made to do that, I always like to ask the applicant if they're in agreement with that direction, because again, they have the right to say, this is our project, this is what we want, and then the board needs to either approve or deny. So we would need, before that motion is formally made, we'd ask the applicant to confirm whether they're agreeable to.
And we need to just double check and see if there's other notifications that have to be given or if they can just be added to a future agenda. So.
Yeah, I just want to clarify with staff when the first feasible date was, because it's my understanding that there may need to be a review period, maybe notice. So we just want to know the date.
So it sounds like any changes would be minor. It wouldn't take a lot of time for review, but because of when the agendas post, I think February 23rd is the soonest that we could give them to get the time to make the revisions and then bring it back. But I think February 23rd, if that's agreeable, is the closest or the soonest date.
And Rebecca, while they're talking, did this involve additional notices that we would need to postpone a date certain?
No notices.
Thank you, Mr. Bennis. I appreciate your.
I guess my question is what are the conditions? It just seems pretty vague.
We're not giving conditions. We're saying, here's some of the things we've discussed.
Okay.
Why don't you come back to us and give us something slightly tweaked from what you've given us tonight based on what we've brought up, which is different from saying, here's the conditions, you have to do it this way. And it's very hard to specify, get rid of cornhole without telling them what you should put in there if we're going to make a condition tonight, which then means we're, as we said, designing for the dais. We don't want to be doing
With all due respect, something like cornhole is just 2 pieces of wood that you throw a beanbag through. That area can be repurposed very easily. I don't think we need to hold up this project anymore. We've discussed the parking, we discussed the landscaping. Okay, the site design is not perfect, but and I agree with your sentiment. They're probably going to skateboard on it. You're absolutely right. I think we should trust these people to do what's going to be right for the space, and we need it's been a decade. We've got 7,000 applications when they opened it up in 2019. 900 families on a waiting list. They closed this waiting list in 2010 with 900 families on there.
John, I asked those questions already knowing what the answers were. That was not a mistake on my part. 10 years, 1 more month isn't going to be a big difference, though. If we can help tweak this so that it's a more livable project for the people who are going to be there for years and years in many cases, and that the surrounding neighborhood is going to live with for years and years in any case, I think that's well worth doing. I understand your frustration because I'm frustrated too, and I loved that previous project, and I'm so disappointed that one's not going to happen. We desperately, desperately need this in Delray, but
I would think the changes are could happen in two 2 weeks. I don't know why they would have to come back in February 23rd. I would think that they would be able to get some revisions in next week. They
We
would
don't know
be
what the
reviewed
city's staffing is like right
Rebecca,
now.
can they
Well,
get
that's
in
why
on
I'm
the
asking.
9th?
Yeah, so Scott is the head of the current planning division, so agendas post 10 days before a meeting, so the agenda for the February 9th would be posting on, yes,
Monday.
on Monday, so I don't know that they would have, if 4 days is enough for them to do that, if that's, I mean.
Well, Jason better work quick.
So I think just understanding the couple items that we talked about, I just want to clarify that because that plays into how quickly we can respond. Sable palms, EV conduits, replacement of the teen amenity, and maybe some reimagining of that interstitial area between those two buildings. Those are the three items that we're talking about?
And
That's
I
concerned
do want to
about the
make
parking.
one thing,
That's
sorry.
got the parking.
So, I'm sorry.
I keep my mask
I don't
on so
think
you
we're
probably
gonna
can't
get
see
a
I'm
change
talking.
in parking in this.
This is William, City Attorney's Office. I just want to make something abundantly clear. That if you make certain changes, that's not a guarantee that you walk in and it's, yes, well, now there's a sable palm, so you're approved. So you're kind of summarizing some of the concerns you've heard, and that's fine, but I just want you to understand that the board will still conduct the review and still needs to do the review, and it's not as, just because there's now a sable palm is not some type of automatic, approval. I just wanted to, the way it was sounding, it was, as long as I do 1, 2, and 3, we're good to go, and I just want to make that clear.
Understood, yes.
And Annette, I do understand your concerns, but it would be a lot bigger fixes to this project to be able to accommodate more parking.
About the pool. To ask most of these people, are they going to use it? The answer is going to be no. But I can't do that.
I heard a question. May I address the parking concern?
I'm sorry. You have 5 board members up here, and so it's going to come down
6.
to what you think is going to be best for your project as the attorney instruct. Because I happen to help the county with their rental ERA program through my nonprofit. And while there is a need, there is also a clustering phenomenon going on. And you're going to one person come home and 3 people have guests that are parked, and question to Todd's answer, well, now will you have to figure out where to park? That's the reality of what I am trying to discuss. I agree with all the other comments, but problem-solving skills, conflict, police being called, the number of reports that you get as a property manager will come down to conflict around parking, because someone's going to come home and someone has 3 guests over, they didn't park appropriately. That's my biggest concern. But again, and I agree that it does need to get done.
May I address the question about parking?
Please.
We, especially after the P&Z and the required minimum 114 spaces, we have utilized every square foot of this property and the roadside as well to maximize the number of parking spaces. We physically cannot put any more parking spaces on it. Believe me, we've tried. We've gone to many different lengths to attempt to do so. The only way we could do more parking is to do less units, and I don't think that's a trade-off we really want. Very much understand and agree with your concerns. We're trying to, again, it's that balancing act, just like the landscape and the parking. It's a balancing act of units and parking.
Why is it a trade of units and not a trade of the pool?
Good question about the pool. Oh, sorry. Trying to find one that doesn't have stuff all over it. There we go. The pool, even if we, let's say, eliminated the pool, shifted the clubhouse over, we don't have the room required to provide the city standard parking. So we couldn't actually put one of these additional little parking lots that we've got over in, let's say, the pool space or adjacent to the current parking lot because of the city's requirements for divider strips, size of parking spaces, the drive aisle turnaround, things like that. Even if we eliminated some of those amenities, which, the pool is the optional amenity, the tot lot and the cornhole or some form of teen amenity are required by code. We could get rid of the pool, which, degrades the quality of the residents' experiences, in my opinion. We've talked about the hot summers. But even at that point, we wouldn't be able to fit an additional grouping of parking in there.
You probably could.
I'm sorry.
You probably could if you, I don't know. If you did get rid of the pool and you moved the tot lot to the cornhole place, it looks like there's enough room for more parking there. But I'm not here to design your project, but I have to agree that you might be a little short on parking. Anyway.
So, Chair, if I've understood the applicant correctly, that there's not opposition to continue with direction and to come back, is that correct?
Yes, we'll make revisions to the plans, and we'd like to be on the next SPRAB agenda.
So there's not a requirement that it be postponed. Well, there's not an advantage to postponing to a date certain because we don't have the additional notice requirements. So the board could just make a motion to postpone, and if the applicant is able to provide the updated documentation in a timely manner, then they have every opportunity to make that 9th agenda. If the applicant were to request that the board postpone to the 9th, I think the worst case scenario is that we get to the 9th and the agenda needs to be amended or the item postponed again potentially. So there's not a terrible amount of downside if that was the applicant's choice, but it certainly the board is not. Without the additional notice requirement, a simple motion to postpone, and whenever the item is presented to city staff, it can make the very next agenda.
Is that acceptable to you?
Chair, may I ask a point of clarification from the city attorney?
Yes.
Does this postponement impact our appeal at all? It's scheduled for February 1st.
I don't think it should. They're two different items, and in fact, in the land development regulations specifically regarding appeal, it does state that if there is another action that's a precedent based upon the appeal, that you can still proceed. It's just at your own risk. So nothing comes to mind that would prohibit or impact one item or the other not being able to proceed as currently on track.
Thank you for the clarification.
So yes, with that, we would request the postponement to the next meeting.
Okay. Can I get a motion to postpone?
I already moved to continue with
Thank you,
direction.
Carol. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Annette.
Want to do it again?
I think you've
was
adequately
15
stated
minutes
that you
ago. I-
moved to postpone and that Ms. Gray has seconded that.
Okay, so that was Carol made the motion.
Yes.
and
And
There we
Annette
go.
seconded. Yeah.
Second, okay. Stephen Cohen,
Yes.
Ina Post-Adler,
Yes.
Bryce Patton is absent, Carol Perez,
Yes.
John Brewer,
No.
Annette Gray,
Yes.
Todd LaRue.
Yes. Thank you. Appreciate your willingness to listen and your responsiveness to all our many questions. I know it's been a lot, but I think we want this to be the best project it can be for Delray Beach, and I think we're working towards that. And as we have said, it is desperately, desperately needed. So thank you so much to the Housing Authority and to all of you for the work to try to make this possible.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members. Appreciate
you.
your comments. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Mr. Poppy, any staff comments?
I don't have any comments. I just would beware to the conversation that just occurred about imposing upon staff our deadlines.
Yes.
We can't always, while you may not understand what we're dealing with, you may not understand our processing and procedures. However, we need to be able to have the space and the ability to do what we need to do to provide you with good service. And so be cognizant that we need to be able to do what we have to do to get, to help you.
I very much appreciate that, Scott, and I very much appreciate what your staff does, and I know that this has been a challenging time for 2 years now. We're coming up on the anniversary of the first case here in the U.S., the 2-year anniversary of the first case here in the U.S., and this has been a challenging time for all of us, but I know particularly for your staff and for the city staff in general. So thank you for that, and I think we've tried to give them a way to work with you to come back at the soonest possible moment without having to set a date that puts pressure on you particularly. So
Much appreciated.
board member, sorry, Mr. Bennett.
Nothing from me. Thank you.
Thank you for your support during all this. It's been helpful to have the support and guidance. So, and appreciate that. Board members, any additional comments?
I'm sorry I put the pressure of the deadline on you.
No worries.
I just want to say also thank you. I wear economic development hat for years, right? And so while I understand my purview here, I can't separate the discussion in my head because they fuel the decision I'm going to make. Affordable housing, workforce housing, low-income housing, very low-income housing has very distinct target markets. And I understand the desire to pull from, these different mentalities to put a project together. But at the end of the day, we all have to look at the end users of the product and some of the challenges that comes with, and some of the nuances and some of the needs, right? So it is a very emotional, Ezra is on the homeless task force, but in one breath, you can't say, well, we have people who are homeless and we're building a product for $2,300 a month with a cornhole and they don't have cars.
So one thing, sorry to cut you off. Just generalized comments, 100% okay. I would just recommend avoiding specific examples from the project because it will be coming before you next week and the applicant has left. And so I don't want them to feel like a conversation happened that impacted, their approval or denial without them being present.
No problem. I appreciate that. Scott, I appreciate your guidance. But you have to just understand I have a 360 global conversation happening in my head about the end users and everybody's patience. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
No, this was quite an education, and thank you, Annette, for all your comments, and of course, Carol, as always.
John, I sense you're very frustrated, and I certainly feel that frustration too. It's taken far too long to go from an empty lot to filling that space with something that is useful for the incredible need we have in the city and the surrounds. I certainly feel that another 2 weeks or another month is not going to make a difference in that. If we can do even some minor things that make it a better project in the long run, something that, a few more trees that soften the temperature in the daytimes, making the outdoor spaces a little more usable for the people who are actually going to live there, I think it's worth it. I really do. And I, without going into too much detail, in respect with Mr. Bennett's comments, I really think this is something that we have to have in this city, but we have to have it done the right way. And that's all I'm working towards. So, all right. Motion to adjourn? All right, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Very good job today. Now Not easy.
No, but I think we did the right thing.